if you're in a relationship where everything is working out except for the sex, a sex expert gave tips to the Daily Mail on when you should stay, or whether you should stay or leave.
Yes, and a sex expert has also informed me that if one of you has a higher sex drive, forcing that person to watch The View greatly reduces one's desire for sex. In fact, it is so effective, according to this expert, that they have replaced chemical castration with watching The View for sex offenders. In fact, it's even so effective that it's reduced sex offenses by nearly 2/3 as people view being forced to watch The View as a much severe punishment to be afraid of than, say, prison. Trigger warning, this is the Jacob Johnston Show. Okay, so the Democrats are going out there trying to use the coronavirus to engage in a bunch of fear-mongering and political attacks. This is how we know that the whole coronavirus is not something that we should all be panicked about and, oh no, the world is going to end. I mean, we've been through this before. The swine flu, the bird flu. Heck, they said the world was going to end with Y2K. And all in all, nothing really big happened. Yes, there were some people affected, and yes, some people die. But it's not the major global catastrophe that they want to make it out to be. And so Trump has issued, what he's going to do. Restrict our travel bans from affected areas, screening people coming into the country, and continued enforcement of our immigration laws, and to put forth researching and development of a vaccine. That's his plan. But the Democrats, of course, that isn't good enough. And if you take a look at what the Democrats are saying they would do in Trump's position, you realize that the Democrats are not fit to lead, whether it's due to incompetence or because they are really horrible, gross people that really want to see you suffer and die. It's a real toss-up which one of those it is. So let's take a look at Elizabeth Warren, and then we'll go through and discuss how this is wrong on so many levels.
I want to talk to you about this because just tonight, President Trump detailed the administration's response to the spread of the coronavirus, and I want to tell you what it includes. It includes stopping non-U.S. citizens from coming to the U.S. from China, screening people coming into the country from infected areas, quarantining those infected, and developing a vaccine. Do you think that response is sufficient, Senator?
No. But let's start, because this really is serious, and we have a lot to talk about here. We know that with any virus that develops, the most vulnerable will be our children, seniors, people with compromised immune systems who are undergoing treatment. So this one is tough. So the way I think about this is, first we think about allocation, kind of our overall approach. I'm going to be introducing a plan tomorrow to take every dime that the president is now spending on his racist wall at our southern border and divert it to work on the coronavirus.
Okay, so let's dive into that. First of all, a wall cannot be racist. It's an inanimate object. It is designed to put up barriers for various reasons. In fact, most of the Democrats live behind walls in gated communities. Does that mean they all are racist living behind racist walls? Well, of course not. For them, it's different. Them being protected, by walls and gates, it's not the same as protecting you behind walls and gates. And so we put up walls because we're trying to keep people out because, well, resource allocation, Elizabeth Warren, we don't have unlimited resources, money, and funds to take care of the entire world. Okay, but what she was proposing there is, the idea that, banning travel from affected areas, screening people coming into the country, along with developing vaccine. No. That's not good. What is good, and what her effective solution is we're going to have open borders, right? We don't know how long a vaccine will take. We don't know whether or not a vaccine can be created, right? If it is, how many years and how many people will die. But in the meantime, we must keep the borders open so that people from all over the world in affected areas can come flooding across our borders as they seek to get medical treatment from the American healthcare system, which puts American lives in danger. See, when you actually take a look at what her policy is or what she's claiming, you realize it makes no sense, and it's not designed to make sense. It's just them trying to use the coronavirus in order to get open borders, in order to stop Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration. It has nothing to do with, protecting the vulnerable among us. In fact, when we take a look at it, these other countries, they're still dealing with diseases in which have been eradicated from the U.S. decades ago, to which we no longer have an immunity to. And so screening people, and this is why we have an immigration process, screening people, especially for health concerns and diseases, is about also protecting ourselves, and stopping a pandemic from spreading across the United States. See, the Democrats, they need illegal immigration. It's a source of their political power because every 10 years, like this year, the census comes out and illegal immigrants are included in the census. And the census determines how many seats in the House of Representatives a state gets, which gives them legislative and political power. But also the Constitution points out that the number of electoral votes a state gets is the number of House seats plus 2 Senate seats. So it gives them greater influence over the outcome of the presidential race. And their desire to have open borders and have illegal immigrants come into the country is far more important to them than your health and safety. Why would you have open borders during a pandemic? Why would you say that stopping, the wall construction and border enforcement is your solution to stopping a pandemic? It doesn't make sense. And yet the people in the CNN crowd, they never put any thought. They just cheer, cheer, cheer because they have no idea what they're talking about. They just are blinded by Trump derangement syndrome that they're willing to do anything and put their own health and their own children and their own parents in severe risk just because Orange Man bad. It is really sickening how they have been using this in their political partisan attacks. And when we go through here, we know that they are going for open borders, not only because they're trying to use this as an excuse to stop the construction of the border wall, but let's take a look at what they try to do with illegal immigrants. They try to claim that they are asylees, right? That they're claiming asylum. Now, asylum is only for those that are being persecuted for either political or religious grounds. But the Democrats have been expanding the definition of what asylum is, or what can asylum be claimed for. And so now they're saying, well, these are economic refugees. So now if you come from a poor, country or an impoverished area of the world, that is enough grounds to consider you an asylum seeker, an asylee, a refugee, right? But, that isn't quite enough for them, and that only had a limited airplay. So what do? They now say, well, now there's climate refugees because of climate change. This is forcing migration. And therefore, these people are climate refugees, and climate is global regardless of the country's wealth. Therefore, we have to let them in because they are seeking asylum. And then they try to blame the U.S. for the causes of climate change, which is complete and total BS. So you can see how they're constantly expanding the definition of asylum and refugees in order to encompass, everybody in the world to have open borders. And now they're trying to use what they are claiming to be a pandemic in order to justify stopping the enforcement of immigration policies and the construction of the border wall. And so they're not really concerned about the health and safety of you. They're just trying to keep the borders open and keep immigration enforcement down. Now, these people claiming to be asylum seekers, asylees, or refugees, we know that it's, complete and utter nonsense because they don't follow any of the asylum process. which is if you're a refugee, seeking asylum, you're supposed to seek asylum in the first country that offers it. But they ignore all the countries in between their home country and the United States because they want to pick and choose. No. We only want to seek asylum in the United States, none of the other countries, right? And instead of presenting themselves at a port of entry, they try to sneak across the border, and only when they are caught do they claim to be, a refugee seeking asylum. That's like saying, you are a shoplifter, and when the alarms go off at the door, and you are caught before you can get to your car, pulling out your wallet and handing them cash, and all of a sudden, no, I'm not a shoplifter, I'm a regular customer. See, I paid for it. But you only did it after the fact, after you were caught. And trying to use the coronavirus to attack the border wall and trying to implement open border policy, well, that's only one of two angles that they are going at, in addition to calling it racist and so forth. But now they also want to say, well, the wall, it's environmentally damaging, such as this.
President Trump's new border wall right behind me. This is being built in Oregon Pipe Cactus National Monument, a designated wilderness area and UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. And essentially this wall is cutting this monument and all of the habitat here off from wildlife habitat south of the border. There's been a lot of confusion, especially in Washington, about whether or not this is new wall construction. And I just want to point out the barriers that were here before this are waist-high vehicle barriers. You or I could jump right over them. Wildlife can pass over or under. And I think specifically Democrats in Congress have tried to minimize the fact that a brand new wall is being built, and it's devastating for the environment here. And the wall is planned to be built right along the border there. So if it is built, we would see it towering over the trees there. We would see this spring blasted with floodlights. It would cut off all wildlife in Mexico, all wildlife south of the border from coming here to drink. And it would change this place forever.
Yes, it's because of the environment. It's environmentally damaging. It would make the landscape look ugly, and it would affect, animal migration, and somehow it would even affect, the migration of birds, whatever. So they're trying every angle that they can to stop the construction of the border wall and immigration enforcement. Whether it's trying to claim, that it's environmentally damaging, or, that the money, would be best served into developing a vaccine for the coronavirus. It's every angle. And this is how we know that they are not serious about, a pandemic, that they're not serious about protecting the United States. Because it's not about actually implementing things that would keep us safe. It's about using it as an excuse to attack anything that stops their desired policy, their desired outcomes, their desire for illegal immigration. And it is just really sickening how they go through and they get away with this every single time. Now, as you can see from that video, when it goes through and it shows, the current border walls, it shows that it's not really a wall. It's, waist-high fence that you can just easily go through. It doesn't even slow anybody down. It may stop, a vehicle, but anybody, running and all of that, it does nothing whatsoever. And we know that we are lacking in border enforcement agents. So when they take a look at Trump's wall, they're saying, oh crap, this isn't, some piddly little fence that we're calling a wall. This is an actual wall that would do something. And this is why they are trying to attack it every way possible, from every angle, in order to try and keep the borders open, why they continue to expand the definition of refugees to keep the border open. Because in the end, for the Democrats, your health, safety, and life doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And let's take one last thing here. Bernie Sanders, Medicare for all. So let's say they actually believed what they were talking about, right? That we should have open borders and a single payer healthcare system, that anybody who crosses our border gets access to from day one. Well, what do you think would happen during a time of a pandemic? Well, what would happen is very simple. The world's population, or at least the affected world population, would do everything they can to get to the United States and cross the border. While they were doing so, they would infect a lot of people along the way, and as they got into the United States, they would spread the virus to American citizens. And they would flood and overwhelm our healthcare system. As you can see, hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of people, depending on how big of a pandemic this is, now flooding our borders, overwhelming our healthcare system, getting free access to healthcare, taxpayer-funded healthcare. Well, what is that going to do for the American citizen? When they become affected, they're not going to be able to get the treatment that they need when they need it. They're going to end up dying on wait lists. Because people from around the world have been able to flood our open borders under the Democrats to get free taxpayer-funded health care. Is this really the type of system that you want? So obviously, no one can be as dumb as what the Democrats are actually proposing. So we know that the coronavirus cannot be as big of an epidemic or a panic as the media would have you believe. Because if it was, the Democrats wouldn't be playing political games and proposing policies that, are obviously, designed to hurt you and put you at risk if implemented. No, it's not, as big of a deal because they're playing political game. They're doing partisan attack acts, and they're trying to twist it into, policy proposals that would not keep us safe, that are stupid and moronic on its face with how you would deal with a pandemic. Okay, so moving along here. Democrats are right now having a big socialist movement within their party, and it's been going on for quite some time. The truth is, the Democrats have always been socialist, but in the past, they've always tried to disguise their socialist tendencies, which is why they're always talking about increasing taxes and expanding welfare programs. Now, there is a difference between what socialism actually is and how socialism is being marketed and promoted by the Democrats. And when you take a look at the followers, you got to wonder how many of them actually know what socialism is and is part of the scam, and how many of them are too stupid to realize what it is that they're actually advocating for. And it's hard to figure out which is which, because let's take a look at how socialism is actually being marketed. It's basically stating that you're entitled to other people's stuff simply for existing. That's what they promote it as. When you actually listen to them, they think that they're entitled to your stuff because they have graced you with their presence. It is an arrogant, self-absorbed ideology, that our way of marketing, that is based off of envy. How dare someone else have more than me? I don't care that they worked harder. I don't care that they took risk. I don't care that they gambled their financial future and it paid off. I sat here playing PlayStation. I'm entitled to your stuff. In fact, you can tell that just by listening to them. And let's hear how it is they try to market socialism.
I don't think it's radical to believe that everyone should have access to health care. I don't think it's radical to believe people can have free access to college. That happens in European states. So no, I don't believe I'm radical.
I'm from an immigrant family. I've seen my parents work so hard for things that should have been afforded to them as soon as they got here. Things like Medicare, things like affordable housing, things like access to secondary education.
Democratic socialists believe that capitalism has given too much power to too few people, and that there should be more democratic control over the economy.
Companies have so much money, they extract all the wealth from the state and don't reinvest anything. And I grew up seeing that as a kid, and every time I go back, it's like it gets worse. There has to be more regulation. There has to be a vision for the future in which the people who work are valued higher than they are now.
We should not be giving any more tax breaks to large corporations.
Some Democratic candidates are nervous the socialism tag would be ballot box poison.
I am troubled by having a socialist lead our ticket.
And that Trump would use it to scare more moderate voters.
What about Mike Bloomberg?
Another capitalist, a capitalist who I think is actually scarier than Donald Trump.
Okay, so let's kind of break that video down a little bit. So they tried to say some things that are supposed to be non-controversial, such as, I believe everyone should have access to health care. Now, what they don't tell you is right now, everybody does have access to health care. In fact, if you show up at the ER, you cannot be turned away. So you're allowed health care. You already have access. But they try to equate, access with payment. Right? And so what they're really trying to say when they try to act reasonable and stating that we believe everybody should have access to healthcare is they believe that they should be provided free healthcare at other people's expenses. That's what they're really saying. I want free healthcare. I don't want to have to pay for it. I don't want to have to pay the doctors who went into large amounts of debt in order to gain the knowledge and skills to, help me, to cure me, to provide for my medical needs. No. I'm entitled to you going into debt and then giving me free care. I mean, it's really enslavement is what they're talking about, that everybody exists to provide them with stuff. And that's how they go along and actually think about healthcare. And you can see Bernie Sanders going off and using this exact same ploy. The ability to see a doctor when you are sick should not be a luxury for those who can afford it. It should be a guaranteed right for all. And it is a guaranteed right for all. It's just you shouldn't be able to be expected that, just because you exist, other people have to provide you with, their service and skills for free. And then you see as it goes on, when my family got here, they weren't provided, they weren't given, everything. Well, no, it is because here in America, you have to work for what you want. You have to work to get everything. Now, when we take a look at, healthcare, because another great con is all the other industrialized nations, all the other developed nations do X, Y, Z, and they know you're not going to research it. They know you're not going to go off and check whether or not that is the case. And in places where that is the case, their healthcare system sucks, right? And the rich are able to buy supplemental private insurance, and they're the only ones that actually get care in a single payer system. But either they're too lazy to research that themselves as they regurgitate what Bernie Sanders says, or they did do the research and they're knowingly trying to defraud you because they want to be able to just sit back and play PlayStation while you do all the work, and then they get to take your money. Now, another thing is they try to say capitalism has put so much wealth in so few hands. No, that's actually socialism. Socialism puts all the wealth and power into a few hands at the top of government. In capitalism, money goes to whoever provides value. So it doesn't matter where you started off in life. You could start off, completely dirt poor and broke. You come up, with an idea, you're able to execute it. You have the knowledge, skills, you take the risk, you put in, 18 hours a day and building it up. You make sacrifices and you can be the next Mark Zuckerberg. You can be the next Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs, and the so on and so forth. But the problem is they don't want to make the effort. They don't want to make the sacrifices. They want everybody else to do all the work, and then they can just vote themselves the money that came from the work of others. They never want to go through and talk about what the people actually did to succeed, how they didn't binge watch Netflix or TV, how they got away from the video games, how they put in sleepless nights, how they put in 18-hour workdays, how they went through struggling. Some people went from sleeping on a friend's couch, homeless, broke, not a dime to their name, but were able to start something online and become rich, millionaires that we all now say, well, we should be able to vote away the money that you created and building the business and creating jobs, we should be able to vote, ourselves the money. It's like, when they talk about, socialism, what socialism is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. It's the tyranny of the majority. And we see this, all over the place. And let me provide you an example. Let's say, you're at work, and we all know that one employee that doesn't do the work, slacks off and expects everybody else to pick up the slack. Well, what happens? Well, when there's no consequences to being lazy and goofing off, what we see happening is that other people decide, well, I'm not going to work so hard. So they decide, everybody else can pick up the slack. Next thing you know, nobody's really putting in much work. Customer service sucks. The business starts losing money and everyone ends up out of a job. That's what socialism does. It disincentivizes job creation. It disincentivizes going out and taking risks in order to build up your own financial future because you think that it's everybody else's responsibility to do so. And Bernie Sanders also goes on and states, if we stay on our current track, children today will have a lower standard of living than their parents. It is the American dream in reverse. Is it such a radical idea to say that every American has a right to quality education, a living wage, and health care? Well, it depends. Now, first off, he first goes off and, states, the results of the problem. But he never goes off to talk about how, this trend of lower standards of living and the American dream in reverse has been on track with the increase in size, scope, and power of government. Right? He never wants to talk about that government, as it's increased, as it's taken over more and more of the economy, all these problems, come about. All these problems are created in society. And then he tries to blame capitalism, which has been undermined and has been, slowly being overthrown by government socialism. What do you think all the taxes, regulations, and all that is? It's government takeover. Now they try to do it through regulation so that they can claim that the businesses are still run by the business owner in the private sector. But that's just only so that they have a scapegoat to blame when their policies fail. And their policies always fail. It inevitably fails. I mean, take a look at, California, where they've been able to implement all of the Democrats' priorities without any, objection, obstacles, or control. And what do we see? We see the biggest divide between the haves and the have-nots with, the very rich, liberal elites living in ivory towers looking down on the people, while there are lots of people, who are homeless. The streets are littered with feces and, drug needles, and the neighborhoods are just not safe, right? They're just not safe. But the Democrats, they don't really care about any of that, because they can't admit that their policies failed and they have no solutions, because the solutions would require, rolling back, eliminating their policies that they've implemented. So instead, they go through and they try some distractions, such as this. A newly proposed bill in California would require store toy aisles to be gender neutral. Now think about this. A homeless problem, feces on the streets, drug needles, a lot of social economic problems as a result of the policies. And where's their focus? Gender neutral toy aisles, or eliminating plastic straws, or transgender education. It's all about avoiding the actual problem. It's all about avoiding admitting the failures of their own policies. And then if you come out and you criticize them for ignoring the plight of the people that they created, they attack you. You're a transphobe, right? You're, not concerned about the environment. This is a global crisis. You should be willing to live in the streets. And, plus there's people all over the world who are in that situation because of the climate crisis. And therefore, you're just being selfish, right? They find ways to distract, and avoid tackling the problems that they created, and then attack you if you go through and you point it out. I mean, that's what socialism is. It's about the government takeover where they confiscate all the wealth into the hands of the top of the government. You're starving, you're homeless, you're financially struggling, and no matter what you do, you cannot escape poverty. You cannot escape starvation because it doesn't matter how much effort and hard work, blood, sweat, and tears you put into providing a life under a socialist economy, under a socialistic system. They're only going to be taking all of that away from you in the end. So it disincentivizes you, and it disincentivizes everyone. So no one's creating anything because there's no point. And plus, you no longer have the resources, the means, or ability to go through and do any of that creation. And once Bernie Sanders, or some other Democrat, if they get elected, what are they going to do? They're going to overthrow democracy. They're going to stack the courts. They've already admitted to that. If they ever get a supermajority in the legislature, they're going to ramshot every unconstitutional policy, and you have no recourses through the courts because the courts will be stacked with a bunch of radical left-wing justices, and it will be the end of democracy. And you see Democrats trying to end democracy right now by trying to pass legislation throughout various states that says we're going to give our states electoral votes to the winner of the national popular vote. Now, this is definitely anti-constitutional because the founders, they did not want a direct popular vote because they understood the dangers of that being two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. It would be, California, New York, Chicago, and maybe one other state, 4 or 5 states that will dictate everything to everybody else throughout the rest of the country. So what would end up happening is they would vote, to tax the snot out of all the other, 40, 45 states, in the union, tax the snot out of them. Those other 40, 45 states would not receive anything back from their contributions. And then the politicians would just all be going off and bribing the large population centers, so that only California and New York and Chicago would get federal taxpayer funded dollars, and the rest of us would be left struggling. They wanted a system in which every state was important, in which every state and the concerns of every state had to be heard and addressed, and everybody had a voice. So it's great that the RNC is hinting at, challenging, these, giving the electoral votes to the national popular votes, because it is stating that it doesn't matter how the people in the state vote. Their electoral votes are going to go to whoever California wants. They're giving up their voice, their voice in government to other states, and they're being completely and totally disenfranchised. And this is socialism, right? They promote it and they market it as rainbows and unicorn farts, that everything is going to be magical, that, just for existing, you're entitled to the, results of other people's hard work and labor. Other people will do all the hard work. You can sit back and play PlayStation, and you're just given everything because you're entitled to stuff just for existing. They implement the policies which create nothing but disasters. Then they create distractions, from the results of their policies and attack you for pointing it out, and then implement legislation and laws to eliminate your voice in government as they consolidate power only to the very top, party leaders and all the money there. And by the time you realize that, you were completely lied to, by the time you realize that everything they said was a complete and total fraud, it's too late. You no longer have any power whatsoever to do anything about it. And why do people keep falling for this scam? Well, it's not just about envy, but also because the Democrats lie about everything. For instance, Joe Biden has finally had to admit that he lied about being arrested in South Africa when trying to meet then in prison Nelson Mandela. One of the powerful things that happens during campaigns and politics is people sharing personal stories. I was talking to this person and they were explaining the struggle of X, or I was traveling and I saw firsthand Y, or I was doing, such and such. And you know what? This all happened, but it turns out they lie. Elizabeth Warren lied about being Native American to get ahead in the job market. She lied about being fired for being pregnant. She's still promoting that lie, even though it's been debunked, because the records from the school board show that she was offered a contract for another year, right? And that it was her that resigned after they had asked her, to stay, and, so on and so forth. So they lie about their heritage. They lie about their history. They lie about their interactions with other people in order to promote a lie that is designed to con you out of your rights and freedoms. And while they're promising you rainbows and unicorns, they're really selling you slavery and oppression. Okay, now moving on to the next story here. As we can see here from the right scoop, Ukraine launches criminal investigation into Joe Biden for quid pro quo, right? Now, this is something that's going to have Joe Biden and the rest of the Democrats freaking out. And so we go through here and we see that Ukraine launches criminal proceedings against the former Vice President Joe Biden on allegations he pressured authorities into forcing the resignation of Ukrainian prosecutor Viktor Shokin. Right. And now we know how the Democrats are going to want to go off and play this. They're going to want to say, well, see, here's the quid pro quo we were talking about during the impeachment trial, where, Trump was pressuring them for an investigation and having, taxpayer funded, money, being withheld in order to get them to do the investigation. And now that the impeachment is over, now we see where the quid pro quo is, which is going to be a false claim. The Democrats, don't want to recognize the truth, which is, of course, that because they launched an impeachment attempt on the basis of, Trump's phone call with Ukraine, in which they made a bunch of false allegations and false claims about, what ended up happening during the impeachment and all over the internet on the conservative side was that we kept playing this video of Joe Biden on camera, bragging about how he used over $1 billion in taxpayer funded guaranteed loans, and said that you won't get it, to the former Ukrainian, administration unless you fire this prosecutor. And the prosecutor was investigating Burisma, which was a company that his son Hunter Biden worked at, served on the board of. And so what ended up happening is there's a lot of things that happen, behind the scenes of administration, and when a new administration comes in, they don't have time to go back and research every little thing that was done in the prior administration. And so the new administration during the impeachment hearing kept seeing this video, coming out of Joe Biden, bragging about how he got a prosecutor fired and leveraged taxpayer funds in order to get that to happen. And so because it highlighted and brought so much attention to Joe Biden and that video, the new administration, in Ukraine, got around to seeing, hey, wait a minute, we didn't know about this. We were unaware of what Joe Biden did with the previous administration. And hey, this does look pretty bad. And so now they're opening up an investigation. So while the Democrats are going to want to go through and try to claim that this was the quid pro quo they were talking about during the impeachment trial and all that, the truth is the investigation was the result of the information that came to light during the impeachment. So it's kind of one of those, manifesting or self-fulfilling prophecies, whereby you believe something is going to happen, therefore you take a course of action that actually makes it happen, when if you had done nothing, it never would have happened, right? And we can see this going through and developing as the investigation, goes on and, is likely to expand into Burisma and Hunter Biden as well. But we know how the Democrats are going to play this. It is very, easy. It is very transparent how the Democrats are. And so I want to be able to get out there, before the Democrats start pushing, the narrative that this was the quid pro quo. I want to make sure that you understand that the investigation was not because of, Trump, withholding, security aid or whatever. Is because of the impeachment attempt highlighting so much what Biden did. Now, the Democrats, they're suffering from a lot of problems going on based off of their conduct during the, Obama administration and things that they have done to try and overthrow the 2016 election since then. Their illegal spying operation, their special counsel and, all of that. Where we saw that they paid foreign sources for, to make up dirt and make up allegations against Trump, for an opposition research file that ended up going to, the government and the FBI and being part of a criminal investigation or a spying operation or used to justify spying on the Trump campaign. How did foreign information paid for by the Democrat and the Hillary campaign end up at the FBI and used as a justification for a spying operation? And then as we've gone through and we've taken a look at the Inspector General's report and everything, we saw that not only was the investigation based off of dirt that the Democrats paid foreign sources for, that was uncorroborated and had no evidence to back it up, but that the FBI agents during the Obama administration, they altered documents, to manufacture evidence. They lied to the FISA courts, and they knew that they were investigating a hoax, among other things, and that they were prosecuting people, claiming that they lied to the FBI, because they didn't remember. Not remembering something is a lie, and saying in your answer, I don't remember, I don't recall, they consider that the same as perjury. Well, things are crashing down on the Democrats, and they're crashing down pretty hard. In fact, Devin Nunes is now coming out and warns that the GOP has subpoenas ready for FBI and DOJ figures if they win the House in 2020. Devin Nunes warned Friday that Republicans have subpoenas ready to go if they take back the majority of the House of Representatives in November, saying they plan to continue investigating and interviewing top FBI and Justice Department officials involved in the Russia investigation. That's right. Because of everything that has come out, and, from the manufactured evidence to the foreign sources to, even, the past things that we've seen, the, use of the IRS to target political opponents and all of that, because of the massive corruption of the Democrat Party and everything that we've seen, we're now saying, hey, you know what? Democrats will agree with you on this. Nobody's above the law, especially the Democrat. And the Democrats are going through and they are freaking out about this and they're trying to find ways to prevent it. Now, the Washington Examiner also reports that Devin Nunes states that Mueller prosecutors should face criminal charges over Russia dirt tipster, in which, we find out that what they were claiming regarding George Papadopoulos and Joseph Massoud, George Papadopoulos was in fact trying to help them find Joseph Massoud. And the FBI said, no, don't bother. We know he's coming to the United States, yada, yada, yada. And then later tried to go back and say, well, you were uncooperative. Now, the whole thing with George Papadopoulos, as I've stated repeatedly in the audio version of my podcast, which I've done more than the video version. And every year, I guess I just kind of reset it, back and get rid of the previous year's, stuff. But, George Papadopoulos went overseas. The problem with the whole George Papadopoulos narrative that the Democrats have tried to push is that when you take a look at Forbes magazine, their opinion article, which was published months before, George Papadopoulos made that trip overseas, and the opinion article, I believe it was titled, "What if Vladimir Putin had Hillary Clinton's emails?" It laid out the various ways in which Putin would use the emails if he had them. And so when you take a look at the conversation between George Papadopoulos and Massoud and what was alleged to have been bragged about in that London bar, it was things that was already public knowledge, public opinion, was already being written about all over the internet. And so they started an investigation because two people were having the same opinion or discussing something, having the same views as half the people over the internet by that time. And let's not forget all the articles that have come out, beforehand stating that Hillary Clinton's emails had been hacked, by Russia, China, North Korea, so on and so forth. And to date, we don't know who actually released the emails because while, yes, Russia was trying to hack them, we don't know if they actually succeeded. And even if they did succeed, we don't know that they were the only ones that succeeded. They just go off and they make this claim based off of only the Democrats' accusation alone. They've never provided any evidence, and the government has never actually been provided the evidence. They just make the claim and they just keep pushing it. Now that is not to say that Russia didn't. Of course they would. They're a foreign country. They want to get all the dirt. But when you take a look at Putin and everything, you realize that, strategically, he would want to use it to control Hillary Clinton in office, to blackmail her and undermine her on the foreign policy stage, especially since he's been able to get the Clintons to roll over for him on so many other things prior. So in any event, getting back, on topic here, the Democrats, are, starting to freak out that the Republicans are saying, hey, you know what, you're right, no one's above the law. We should start investigating, how, Clinton's Oppo research file in which he paid foreign sources for uncorroborated, claims ended up in an FBI investigation. Why did the FBI, alter documents in order to lie to the FISA courts in order to get a warrant to spy on the Trump on the Trump campaign, so on and so forth, And so what the Democrats are doing is they're coming out and now Jerry Nadler, according to the Epoch Times, is demanding information from Barr over claims of political interference. Now, this is very laughable that Jerry Nadler is actually doing this. But basically, as you go through and you read this article, what Jerry Nadler is alleging is that he has oversight. So the people that are being investigated have oversight over the investigators investigating them. Is what essentially they're trying to claim in order to get documents. And they're trying to say that, no. Us targeting, political opponents with the iron fist of government, whether that be the IRS or the FBI, us altering documents, us manufacturing evidence, us lying to the FISA courts. No. That's not a problem. That's not an issue. We are above reproach. But you investigating those illegal and criminal activities, well, that can only be politically motivated, right? That there is no legitimacy to do so. And so now we're just going to allege that you investigating our political abuse of power to target you investigating that, no, that's political interference. That is the crime. That's going to be the next impeachable offense claim by the Democrats. I mean, that's just like, you going through and robbing a liquor store, right? And then, because you have influence or power over the police station, you tell them I did it, and you provide them falsified evidence, maybe even went through and edited a deep fake video. They went through, they investigated me, and you don't like me because I'm running against you for the next election for, city council, let's say, right? And then they investigate, they come up empty. But during the investigation, they found out that the video was faked, that the fingerprints were actually yours, and all of that. And then we say, hey, we should investigate you because, the evidence actually points to you. And you come out and you make claims of political interference and abuse of power. All right, it's always, time and again, the Democrats accusing their political opponents of the very corruption and criminal activity that the Democrats themselves do. And they don't ever have accountability for anything because they always have an excuse. They're always the victims. They can always claim to be the victim, and they know that the media will always push that narrative that they are somehow the ones being victimized if they're investigated based off of evidence of their criminal activities, while at the same time, they promote themselves as being altruistic, always in the right, thinking about the greater good for manufacturing, doctoring, and making up evidence, lying to the courts in order to spy on you for the end purpose of influencing the outcome of an election in their favor. And so when it comes out and we see, Trump's, poll numbers, he's more popular than Obama was at the same point in the presidency. He has a great economic record. His support among minorities is going up. And the Democrats, being completely radical, and the Democrats already freaking out that their chances in 2020 is pretty slim. Devin Nunes coming out and saying, hey, we agree that no one's above the law. Therefore, we have subpoenas ready to go to investigate the crimes the Democrats have committed, to which we have actual, real, bona fide evidence for. And so the Democrats' only play here is deflect and distract, which is really their only play for absolutely everything. Okay, so as we start wrapping up here, there's just a couple of stories that I want to be going through and talking about because they do have some importance. Now, as the Epoch Times has reported, PragerU has lost its, appeal court battle against YouTube. The appeal court has gone through and stated that YouTube is not subject to the First Amendment because they are a private company. Now, with this, it's half right, half wrong, in the sense that I believe that PragerU brought the wrong lawsuit against YouTube. It brought a First Amendment lawsuit against YouTube, fighting on constitutional grounds about the First Amendment and maybe trying to claim that YouTube was some sort of public utility. That was the wrong type of case to go through and bring. I would have brought a fraud lawsuit against YouTube. Why? Well, YouTube claims to be a public a platform, not public platform, but a platform. And the laws regarding a platform are specific that they can't, censor, legal activities, and that they can't discriminate against their customers based off of, political beliefs or, individual beliefs and views. And what YouTube does is it goes out there now in court, it argues back and forth between whether it's a publisher or a platform based off of what argument will help them in that individual case, which is fraudulent, to go through and switch what you are based off of what lawsuit is come your way. But they have sought the protection under the Communication Decency Act against privacy, not privacy, but copyright violation. Now, with that, as they go through and they claim to be a platform, they make a deal with those who choose to use the platform. You'll get access to the platform in exchange for them collecting data on you that they can then use to, sell to advertisers and generate money to keep it going. Now, we agree to this because we want access and the ability to use the platform, so we give them a payment in the form of data. But then they go off and they act like a publisher, where they censor things that they don't like, based off of personal and political views, and they target certain YouTubers who they have political disagreements with. And they do so many things such as, demonetizing them, even though they have no violations against the community guidelines or standards, or they change their guidelines and standards in order to eliminate certain political views and beliefs that they do not like. And so if they're going out and claiming to be one thing, a platform, in order to get data from you from which they can use then to make money, and then they go off and act as a publisher, that is fraud. That is financial fraud. That is consumer fraud. That is fraudulent activity and behavior, because they are lying to you to get something of value out of you and then giving you something different. And so with that, PragerU brought the wrong lawsuit when they brought a First Amendment lawsuit against YouTube. They should have brought a fraud lawsuit. So, on the one hand, I don't like the outcome of this particular ruling, but on the other hand, it's still, PragerU, what were you thinking? You brought the wrong type of lawsuit for this case, right? And if you had prepared a fraud lawsuit and they had gone through and tried to claim, no, we are a platform, and you brought in the court filings from all the cases in which they claim to be a publisher, you could have also proven that they lied to the courts based off of what the lawsuit is, that they are fraudulent in their legal defenses as well. So that is one take or one opinion. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but as I stated, claiming to be one thing to get value out of you while acting as something completely different does seem to me to be a clear-cut case of fraud. Again, I'm not a legal expert. Okay, so the House Democrats have done two things recently. One, they decided to pass legislation declaring lynching a crime. Now, this is a useless piece of legislation, just meant for nothing more than virtue signaling, because lynching was already a crime. It was covered under the crime of murder. Lynching someone doesn't make them double dead, doesn't, double the murder. It's still murder. And going off and saying, okay, we're going to get you for murder and lynching. I mean, it's like, okay, you already got a life sentence. To go off and say that, okay, now we're going to give you 2 life sentences. Well, giving someone 2 life sentences doesn't make them live twice as long to serve it. So they took something that was already a crime, of murder, and they gave it another classification, for a specific type of murder, in order to try and go through and appeal to minority communities. Now, I can't, remember or find anything about the last time there was ever a lynching that happened in the United States, as at least not in the context that we think of lynching. So this is one of those virtue signaling. See, we may have, ruined your, family, structure. We may have decimated your communities. We may have shoved you down in poverty after years of and centuries of slavery, segregation, and discrimination. But now we're on your side because we, made lynching, which was already a crime, a double crime. And that we're going to somehow make someone live twice as long just to finish out the sentence of a double life. It's like, give me a break. I mean, it is one of those useless virtue signaling things that is designed to make people think that they actually did something when they didn't. This is just a Democrat con job. Now, on the other hand, the Democrats who, if you remember in the previous segment, are talking about, think of the children, think of the old people, when they were talking about the coronavirus and somehow open borders would provide better protection than a border wall, and that no enforcement of immigration policy was going to keep us safer than enforcing immigration policy. But now they go off and we take a look at what they have done in blocking an amendment to save babies who survive abortion. So we're not talking about, fetuses and all of that are still inside the womb. We're talking about babies that have been born alive, breathing outside the womb. And what's going on, in certain situations is that they're just depriving the baby of, of food and nutrition and all that, and the baby dies. And so this was, an amendment that was designed to say, hey, if the baby was born alive, right? If the baby was born alive, then you must treat it like any other human being, living, breathing, making noise, and give it life-saving treatment, or at least do not starve it to death, which is one of these situations where what they are doing is actual murder. Now, abortion is murder itself, but now you got a physical being outside of the womb, its own independent body, breathing alive, and now they are starving it to death. They are killing the baby. And now they're trying to argue that, forcing them to actually care for the child so that the child could live. Well, that violates a woman's right to choose. When does this whole, policy of death, and platform of death tend to start sinking into people's mind as immoral? And when you think about socialism, considering that the Democrats view death as a positive outcome, that killing someone is a right, to choose, why would you think socialism would be a good thing? Why do you think government provided health care under the Democrats that believe that death is health care? Why would you trust them with your health care? And so this is one of those really sickening things that make you wonder, why does anybody ever support a Democrat? Okay. Finally, in the last episode, I talked about maybe liberalism is more of mental laziness than it is mental illness. Although some of the things that those on the left do make you question that maybe it is in fact a mental illness, such as this particular clip.
I knew in my heart I was meant to be a mom. I babied my brothers and sister. I babied my cousin. They would say, oh, Lucinda's going to be a mom and any day now, and she's going to have like 5 kids or more. And I always thought so too. I just remember one day just feeling super sick. My lower abdomen was hurting so bad. And I asked my husband to take me to the hospital. They found out that I had stage 4 endometriosis. I remember waking up in the hospital room by myself and the doctor coming in and telling me, like, I'm really sorry, but I don't think you're ever gonna have kids. And maybe like 2 minutes later, my husband came into the room. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, I'm never going to be a mom. I'm never going to have kids that look like you. Because that's what I've always wanted. I wanted my kids to look just like my husband. And now it's never going to happen. But, it's okay.
So now, just for a little more context here. With this video, what was going on is we're talking about people that are using dolls and treating them like children, where they would try and manufacture dolls that are lifelike, enough to fool people. And then these people will go through, push them around outside in strollers, hold them, give them their own nursery and changing room, buying all the baby stuff, taking them out in public, getting clothing and all that, treating them as if they're actual kids, as if they're actual babies, these inanimate objects, these dolls, just because they want to try and look real. And I get it. They're wanting to act like it's therapeutic, that it's a way to, deal with certain realities that they have problems with. I mean, now after watching this, I understand that new series, I think on Apple TV, where I can't remember if it's a movie or a TV series, but I saw an advertisement for it, where they got a doll after a miscarriage, and now that doll has, been imprinted upon as an actual child, and the mother's completely delusional and all that. Now, I just have a problem with this because I don't believe it's therapeutic to play into one's delusion. But of course, those on the left, they believe that it's their right to force people to play into their delusions, to play into their fantasies. This is why you get the whole transgenderism and gender, neutrality or non-binary. They have a delusion, and then they want to force you to play into that delusion and then call you horrible names if you don't play into that delusion. And with this, maybe I just don't, fully understand why anybody would do this. I just think that there is something, emotionally wrong and damaging, psychologically damaging, to take a doll, and treat it like it's a child, giving it a crib, a changing table. Changing table for what? It doesn't do anything. Going off buying diapers. And, if this was a sexual education class, where kids would take home to see what it's like, to have a baby, that would actually cry and all that. And that's all about learning how demanding children is, fine. But these are grown adults, pushing around these dolls and strollers and all that. And they're convincing themselves that this is like a real baby, that this is their child, this is their offspring to take care of. I mean, if you're really desperate, for a child, and you can't have any of your own, you can either adopt or get a fur baby, which is another way to say a pet, a dog or a cat. Get something that's actually alive, that's actually real. But this is the society that the left is developing. Everyone can make up any delusion that they want, and then you're supposed to play into that delusion. You're supposed to encourage that delusion. And then we wonder why the left is incapable of operating in civilized society. Why it is the left, doesn't have any real, knowledge of what's going on, or, they can keep voting Democrats regardless of the results of the policies. And, it's just the complete inability and unwillingness to accept personal responsibility and to accept reality and work within reality. Now, it's one thing to say, hey, we want to change things, build a brighter future. Yes, but that has to be based in some type of reality. All right. So that's it for this episode. If you want to get more episodes, I'm trying to do more and more video, but as you may tell from the YouTube timeline or whatever video platform you're watching this on, it's hard for me to be consistent with video. So I do have an audio podcast. Audio is a lot easier to do. There's a heck of a lot less editing, a heck of a lot less, clipping, and setting up the visuals, because there is no visuals in audio. So if you want to be able to catch, the audio version and be able to listen to it on the go and get more episodes, go find me in iTunes or wherever else you listen to podcasts at. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so that you'll know when new videos drop. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I will be back again soon. Hey, YouTube viewers, thank you so much for your time and attention in watching this video. If you want to get more, click on the video playing off to the side here. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification bell so that you'll be notified when new videos and content drops. Thank you, and I appreciate